You are in the Pacho Imperial in Rio de Janeiro, and the air is as thick as honey. It is September 1821, and the humidity clings to your skin, a physical manifestation of the pressure settling upon the shoulders of one man, Dom Pedro, the Prince Regent. Outside, the city buzzes with the chaotic energy of a colonial capital that has, for 13 years, been the heart of an empire. The scent of tropical flowers mingles with the salt of the Guanabara Bay and the foul stench of the slave markets. This is a city of impossible contradictions, and you are standing at its boiling point. A packet ship has arrived from Lisbon, cutting through the waves like a knife delivering a verdict. Its dispatches lie on a polished jacaranda table before the prince. The wax seals of the Portuguese Cortes Gerais, the new revolutionary parliament, are unbroken. Everyone in this room, from the calculating ministers to the nervous guards, knows what those seals likely hold. They hold a demand, an ultimatum. The liberals who seized power in Porto last year have tasted control, and now they wish to turn back the clock. They want the king, João VI, to remain in Lisbon. They want the ports of Brazil shuttered once more to all but the mother country. They want the Prince Regent, Dom Pedro, to be summoned home, his education to be completed under their watchful eye. They want to wind the great imperial clock back to 1807, to put the genie of Brazilian autonomy back into its colonial bottle. The Brazilian elites who surround Pedro are a wall of anxious ambition. They are landowners, their wealth measured in hectares of sugarcane and coffee, their fortunes built on the backs of enslaved Africans. For them, the Cortes' demands are a death sentence to the world they have built. They have tasted free trade with the British. They have tasted being the seat of power. They whisper in Pedro's ear, their words a venomous current against the old world. Break with them. Declare an empire. Your empire. We will be its foundation. This is the moment history has taught you to expect. The moment of the break. The defiant cry. The unsheathing of a sword on the banks of the Ipiranga River. But as Dom Pedro's letter opener slices through the wax, the silence in the room deepens. The documents are unfurled. His eyes, dark and intense, scan the elegant script. The expected ultimatum is not there. The arrogant command is absent. You watch his face, a mask of aristocratic composure, but you see a flicker in his eyes, not of anger, but of profound, world-altering confusion. Then, comprehension. The letters do not contain a demand for submission. They contain an offer. This is the work of a different faction within the Cortes. A group of pragmatists who have won the day not through idealism but through sheer, cold arithmetic. Men from Porto and Lisbon whose families grew rich on Brazilian sugar and Angolan slaves. They argued, behind closed doors in the Palácio das Necessidades, that to sever Brazil would be to sever Portugal's own limbs. The nation, ravaged by the Napoleonic Wars and economically prostrate before the British, would not survive the loss. To demand Brazil's return to colonial status is to guarantee its independence and to hand its immense markets to London on a silver platter. Their logic was inescapable. So they drafted a different future. They drafted the Lisbon Accord. It is a document of breathtaking audacity. It reaffirms the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves, not as a temporary arrangement born of Napoleonic terror, but as a permanent modern state. It establishes a diarchy, a monarchy of two crowns. Lisbon and Rio de Janeiro are to be named co-equal capitals of a single transatlantic empire. The king will reign from Lisbon. The Prince Regent will govern from Rio. The court and the Cortes Gerais will, in time, alternate their sessions between the two cities, a parliament carried across the ocean on steam and sail. Brazil will not be a colony, but an integral and powerful kingdom, sending its own elected deputies to the parliament in Lisbon. It is a radical vision. Not an empire of metropole and periphery, but an empire of two hearts, beating in unison across an ocean. The ethical tension in the room becomes a physical force. The Brazilian landowners, led by the formidable statesman José Bonifácio de Andrada e Silva, are suddenly adrift. Their path to an independent slave-owning empire, which seemed so clear a moment ago, is now clouded. To declare independence now would not be a righteous act of liberation against a tyrannical mother country. It would be a selfish, treasonous rebellion against a partner who is offering equality. It would be a naked power grab by the planter class, and they know the world, especially the abolitionist-minded British, will see it as such. The unexpected twist is the sheer brilliance of the Portuguese proposal. It reframes the entire conflict. It is not about freedom versus subjugation anymore. It is about two competing visions of the future. A sovereign but isolated Brazilian empire, potentially unstable, surrounded by hostile Spanish-American republics, and at the mercy of British naval power. Or a Luso-Brazilian United Kingdom, a global power stretching from the Amazon to the Tagus, from Macau to Angola, its navy a force in the Atlantic, its resources seemingly limitless. Dom Pedro, the impulsive, romantic prince, is captured by the grandeur of the vision. To be Emperor of Brazil is a great destiny, but to one day be king of this United Kingdom, this global entity, this phoenix rising from the Napoleonic ashes, is a destiny of historic, world-shaping proportions. It appeals to his vanity, his ambition, and his genuine belief in the glory of his house, the House of Braganza. He stands. The room holds its breath. He does not draw his sword. He raises the accord. His voice rings out, not with the fire of rebellion, but with the solemnity of an oath. He will not deliver the cry of Ipiranga. He will deliver the Declaration of Union. My father's government offers not chains, but a shared throne, he proclaims, his gaze sweeping over the assembled elites. They ask not for our submission, but for our partnership in forging the world's first transatlantic kingdom. To refuse this is to choose uncertainty. To accept is to choose greatness. He turns to his most influential advisor. Senor Andrada, do we choose to be a lonely island or the heart of a new continent? José Bonifácio, the would-be patriarch of an independent Brazil, sees the new reality in a flash. He sees the power Brazil would wield inside this new structure. He sees Brazilian deputies in Lisbon, Brazilian resources dictating imperial policy. He sees a way to protect the planters' interests, not by breaking away, but by dominating the union from within. His council, which a day before was for independence, now shifts. He bows his head. Your Highness, we choose greatness. That evening, Rio de Janeiro does not celebrate the birth of a new nation. It celebrates the confirmation of a new world order. Cannons fire from the fortresses guarding the bay. The Portuguese garrison, which in another timeline would be a hated occupying force, marches in parade, their blue and white uniforms cheered by the crowds. They are not foreign soldiers. They are soldiers of the United Kingdom, of their kingdom. The news travels outward, a shockwave in reverse. In Lisbon, the radical liberals who sought to humble Brazil are stunned into silence, outmaneuvered by their pragmatist colleagues. In London, the Foreign Office scrambles. Their carefully laid plans to play a weak Portugal against a fledgling Brazil to dominate the trade of both are suddenly obsolete. They are now faced with a unified, reinvigorated rival. In Buenos Aires and Lima, the new republics look north not at a sibling nation breaking from its colonial past, but at a revitalized imperial giant, its gaze now fixed upon its own continental frontiers. The cry of Ipiranga is never uttered. The 7th of September is not Independence Day. It is the day of the Accord, the day the Luso-Brazilian world chose not to break, but to bind itself together in a daring, uncertain, and momentous experiment. The seeds of conflict are not destroyed. They are merely replanted in a new, much larger, and far more volatile garden. You are in London, in a room where maps are not decorations but weapons. The October air, thick with coal smoke, and the damp chill of the Thames seeps through the window frames of the Foreign Office. Here the world is redrawn in ink. Fortunes of nations decided by the scratch of a quill on vellum. You are George Canning, His Majesty's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, and the dispatch you hold in your hand feels heavier than it should. It is not the report of a battle lost or a monarch's death. It is the news of a union preserved, and it is infinitely more vexing. For a decade, your policy, and that of your predecessors, has been built upon a simple, elegant, and profitable assumption: the inevitable fragmentation of the Iberian empires. As Napoleon's armies tore through Spain and Portugal, you watched their American colonies stir and break free. British merchants followed the Royal Navy, prying open new markets in Buenos Aires, Valparaiso, and Caracas. The Spanish Empire was dying, and Britain was its eager inheritor. Portugal was to be the final, most refined act of this grand strategy. The pieces were perfectly arranged. An indebted and enfeebled Portugal, wholly dependent on British protection. A vast and wealthy Brazil, governed by a rash young prince, straining at the colonial leash. The plan was clear: encourage Brazilian independence, recognize the new empire swiftly, and bind it to Britain with treaties of commerce that would make it a de facto economic colony. Two weak states, Portugal and Brazil, would then compete for British favour, selling their raw goods for rock-bottom prices and buying British-manufactured products at a premium. It was a strategy of masterful, bloodless puppetry. The Lisbon Accord has burned that puppet theatre to the ground. You read the dispatch again. Co-equal capitals, a diarchy. A single, transatlantic United Kingdom. It is not the act of a dying empire. It is the act of a profoundly and dangerously rational one. They have seen the trap you set, and they have refused to step in it. Instead of two bickering client states, you now face a single, unified entity. A behemoth, as one of your undersecretaries nervously called it. A Luso-Brazilian giant straddling the Atlantic, controlling the trade routes from the River Plate to the Bight of Benin. Its landmass is colossal. Its resources, sugar, coffee, cotton, diamonds, hardwoods, are the envy of the world. Its navy, combining the old Portuguese fleet with new ships to be built in Brazilian yards, is now a significant force in the South Atlantic. Your first instinct is rage. The sheer impertinence of it. The Portuguese court, which fled to Brazil under the protection of the Royal Navy, has used the very safety you provided to forge a new destiny that excludes you. But the rage quickly cools, replaced by the cold calculus that has made you one of the most formidable diplomats in Europe. The Anglo-Portuguese alliance of 1,373, the world's oldest, is a cornerstone of your foreign policy. A direct confrontation is unthinkable. You cannot attack your oldest ally. You must find another way. A subtler way. The new British strategy is born in this smoky room over the course of a single afternoon. If you cannot break the United Kingdom apart, you will strangle it from within. You will find its internal fault lines and press upon them until the entire structure groans. The first line of attack is debt. The Portuguese crown owes British banking houses an astronomical sum. Loans taken to fund the war against Napoleon and to rebuild Lisbon. You will call in those markers. You will demand favourable terms, concessions, access. The second, and far more potent, weapon is morality. Your nation is in the grips of a powerful abolitionist movement. The Slave Trade Act of 1807 was not merely legislation, It was the birth of a new moral identity for the British Empire. You will wield this identity like a club. The United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil is an empire built entirely on human bondage. The sugar plantations of Pernambuco, the coffee fields of Rio de Janeiro, the gold mines of Minas Gerais, they all run on the sweat and blood of hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans. The Brazilian planter aristocracy, who now hold immense power within this new state, will never agree to abolition. The liberals in Lisbon's Cortes, who fancy themselves modern Europeans, are deeply uneasy with the institution. Therein lies the fault line. The ethical tension is perfect. You will champion the cause of the African slave, not merely because your Quaker constituents demand it, but because it is the most effective political wedge you can imagine. You will send envoys to Lisbon to speak of enlightenment and human dignity, while your naval squadrons off the coast of Africa will harass Luso-Brazilian slave ships, citing treaties they are now strong enough to dispute. You will turn their transatlantic union into a transatlantic argument, a constant, draining conflict between the liberal heart in Lisbon and the slave-holding fist in Rio. The unexpected twist arrives a month later, in the form of the Viscount of Itabaiana, the Luso-Brazilian ambassador. He is shown into your office. In the past, these meetings were simple affairs. The Portuguese ambassador would arrive, hat in hand, to ask for aid or ratify a treaty that overwhelmingly favoured Britain. But this man is different. He carries himself not with the deference of a supplicant, but with the cool confidence of an equal. He represents not just Portugal, but Brazil. He represents two thrones. After the pleasantries, you begin to apply the pressure. You speak of the outstanding debts. You speak of Britain's moral commitment to ending the vile slave trade. You expect the usual prevarications and pleas for time. Instead, the Viscount smiles. Your concerns are, of course, entirely valid, Mr. Canning. He begins, his English precise. The United Kingdom is committed to fiscal responsibility and, in time, to addressing the complexities of our labour system. However, for us to address these matters, our kingdom must be placed on a sound economic footing. He slides a folio of papers across your desk. His Most Faithful Majesty, King João VI, has instructed me to open negotiations for a full revision of our commercial treaties. You stare at him. A revision. He means the Methuen Treaty of 1703 and the Strangford Treaty of 1810. These are the sacred texts of British economic dominance over Portugal. They give British woolens preferential treatment in Portuguese markets, in exchange for Portuguese wine, a trade that has systematically suffocated Portuguese industry for over a century. The 1810 treaty opened Brazil's ports but slapped tariffs on Luso-Brazilian goods that made them uncompetitive against your own. A revision? You repeat, your voice betraying nothing of the shock you feel. Indeed, the Viscount continues, his smile unwavering. A partnership of equals requires a treaty of equals. We have the cotton of Maranhão and the looms of Porto. We have the hides of the Rio Grande and the tanneries of Lisbon. We propose to build our own integrated textile industry. We can clothe our own people and our vast African territories. Unless, of course, Britain is willing to offer terms that make it more profitable for us not to. It is a declaration of economic war, delivered with the politeness of a dinner invitation. You will turn their transatlantic union into a transatlantic argument, a constant, draining conflict between the liberal heart in Lisbon and the slave-holding fist in Rio. The unexpected twist arrives a month later, in the form of the Viscount of Itabaiana, the Luso-Brazilian ambassador. He is shown into your office. In the past, these meetings were simple affairs. The Portuguese ambassador would arrive, hat in hand, to ask for aid or ratify a treaty that overwhelmingly favoured Britain. But this man is different. He carries himself not with the deference of a supplicant, but with the cool confidence of an equal. He represents not just Portugal, but Brazil. He represents two thrones. After the pleasantries, you begin to apply the pressure. You speak of the outstanding debts. You speak of Britain's moral commitment to ending the vile slave trade. You expect the usual prevarications and pleas for time. Instead, the Viscount smiles. Your concerns are, of course, entirely valid, Mr. Canning. He begins, his English precise. The United Kingdom is committed to fiscal responsibility and, in time, to addressing the complexities of our labour system. However, for us to address these matters, our kingdom must be placed on a sound economic footing. He slides a folio of papers across your desk. His Most Faithful Majesty, King João VI, has instructed me to open negotiations for a full revision of our commercial treaties. You stare at him. A revision. He means the Methuen Treaty of 1703 and the Strangford Treaty of 1810. These are the sacred texts of British economic dominance over Portugal. They give British woolens preferential treatment in Portuguese markets in exchange for Portuguese wine, a trade that has systematically suffocated Portuguese industry for over a century. The 1810 treaty opened Brazil's ports but slapped tariffs on Luso-Brazilian goods that made them uncompetitive against your own. A revision? You repeat, your voice betraying nothing of the shock you feel. Indeed, the Viscount continues, his smile unwavering. A partnership of equals requires a treaty of equals. We have the cotton of Maranhão and the looms of Porto. We have the hides of the Rio Grande and the tanneries of Lisbon. We propose to build our own integrated textile industry. We can clothe our own people and our vast African territories. Unless, of course, Britain is willing to offer terms that make it more profitable for us not to. It is a declaration of economic war. Delivered with the politeness of a dinner invitation, you are standing on the Cais do Valongo in Rio de Janeiro, and the very stones beneath your feet are saturated with human misery. This is the largest slave wharf in the Americas, the great maw of the United Kingdom's economic engine. The air is a foul cocktail of bilge water, unwashed bodies, and endemic fear. You see them, the pesas da India, the pieces from the Indies, as the manifests so clinically call them. Men, women and children, their bodies branded, their eyes hollow with the trauma of the Middle Passage. They are marched in chains towards the warehouses where they will be fattened and oiled like livestock before auction. The price of sugar is written in scars. The wealth of two continents is built on this foundation of broken lives. This is the great, unacknowledged truth at the heart of the United Kingdom, the sin that binds Rio and Lisbon together. Now you are 3,000 miles away, in Lisbon's Palácio das Necessidades, where the Cortes Gerais is in session. The humid, tropical stench of the Valongo is replaced by the scent of beeswax, old paper, and the damp wool of men's coats. But the subject is the same. The ghosts of the wharf haunt this chamber. Here, the brutal reality of slavery is abstracted into clauses, amendments, and political theory. The chamber is a study in contrasts. You see the Portuguese deputies, men from Porto, Coimbra, and the Alentejo. They are lawyers, professors, and merchants, their faces pale from the Atlantic sun. They speak of Montesquieu, of the rights of man, of Portugal's place in a modern, enlightened Europe. They see the institution of slavery as a stain upon the honour of their new United Kingdom, a barbaric relic that makes them look backwards in the eyes of London and Paris. Then you see the Brazilian bloc. They are a different breed of men. Landowners and magnates from Bahia, Pernambuco, and the fertile valleys of the Paraíba River. Their skin is darker, weathered by a tropical sun. their fine silks and jacaranda canes, cannot hide the hardness in their eyes. They do not speak of Montesquieu. They speak of property, order, and economic reality. To them, the liberals' moral posturing is a decadent luxury. The talk of men who do not understand that civilization, their civilization, is grown in soil tilled by captive hands. They represent not just a political faction, but an entire world order, and they are not here to debate its dismantling. The legislative war begins, not with a roar, but with a carefully crafted proposal from the liberal benches. It is the Lei de Supressão do Tráfico, a bill to abolish the transatlantic slave trade. The logic is surgical. It does not attack slavery itself, a step the liberals know is political suicide. It attacks the supply line. It is presented as a moral compromise, a way for the United Kingdom to appease the increasingly hostile British, whose naval squadrons have begun to treat Luso-Brazilian slavers as little better than pirates. We must cut off the source of this poison, argues a deputy from Lisbon, his voice ringing with conviction. We must cleanse our kingdom of this inhuman commerce. The Brazilians do not shout. They do not protest. They listen patiently, their faces impassive. Their leader, a formidable Bahian planter named Domingos Alvarez Muniz, a man whose family fortune is measured in square leagues and thousands of souls, does not rise to argue. He waits. For days, he allows the liberals to exhaust their moral outrage. He lets them make their grand speeches for the records. Then, when the momentum is at its peak, he presents his counterstroke. It is not a rejection. It is an amendment, and it is a work of diabolical genius. My esteemed colleagues from the Elder Kingdom speak with great passion. Muniz begins, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the chamber. They speak of a modern future, and we, the sons of Brazil, share that desire. But a future cannot be built by demolishing its own foundation. He agrees, to the astonishment of the liberals, that the transatlantic slave trade is a source of instability, a diplomatic liability. He agrees it must, eventually, be phased out. In exchange for this concession, his amendment demands three things. First, the explicit recognition of existing slaves as permanent, inviolable property, enshrined in the United Kingdom's constitution. Their status, and that of their children, would be protected by the full power of the state. Second, the full legalization and regulation of an internal slave trade. If they cannot import new labor from Africa, they must be free to move their existing assets across the vast territories of Brazil, from depleted sugar plantations in the northeast to the booming new coffee lands of the south. Third, a massive state-funded program of infrastructure development, railroads and canals, paid for by the Central Treasury in Lisbon, to facilitate this internal market and maximize the efficiency of the kingdom's labor resources. The ethical tension snaps taut in the chamber. The liberals are caught in a perfectly designed trap. To vote against the amendment is to vote against their own bill, to lose their one chance to end the transatlantic trade. They would be seen as failures, their moral crusade amounting to nothing. But to vote for it is to make a horrifying trade. They must agree to sanctify the principle of slavery in the nation's highest law. They must use taxes collected from Portuguese merchants and peasants to build the very railroads that will carry chained men and women to new lands of bondage. They would be ending one evil only to strengthen and modernize the very heart of the institution. The unexpected twist is the utter pragmatism of the Brazilian position. They are not fighting against modernity. They are co-opting it. They are demanding the tools of the industrial age railways, capital, and constitutional law to reinforce a system of feudal brutality. They have turned the liberals' weapon of moral progress against them, forcing them to become complicit. The debate that follows is agonizing. Idealists rage against the pact with Satan. Pragmatists argue that it is a necessary evil, a first step on a journey of 1,000 miles. The British ambassador, observing from the gallery, is apoplectic. He sees that the planters' proposal, while appearing to concede to British demands, would actually make the Luso-Brazilian slave economy stronger, more resilient, and far less susceptible to external pressure. A domestic slave market is something the Royal Navy's ships cannot blockade. The Crown, embodied by the aging King João VI, sees only one thing: a path to compromise that avoids the fatal rupture of the United Kingdom. His ministers quietly pass the word: the accord must be preserved. A compromise must be found. The vote is held on a rainy Lisbon afternoon. You watch as deputy after deputy rises to cast their lot. The Liberals are fractured. Many abstain, unable to stomach the choice. But enough of them, the pragmatists, the compromisers, join with the unified Brazilian bloc and the Crown's loyalists. The amended bill passes. A courier ship carries the news back to Rio. In the capital of the New World, the planters celebrate their victory. They have not just defeated the abolitionists, they have made them partners. The flow of captured Africans across the ocean will slow to a trickle over the next decade, but the institution itself is now more secure than ever. The Valongo Wharf will change. It will no longer be the point of entry for foreign captives, but the central hub of a vast, kingdom-wide human marketplace. The Abolitionist Paradox is now the law of the land. In the name of progress, the United Kingdom has shackled itself more tightly to its original sin. The legislative war is over for now, but the moral corrosion has just begun. The kingdom has chosen unity over liberty, and the consequences of that choice will fester, poisoning the soul of the two-throned empire for generations to come. You are lying on your belly in the tall, sharp-edged grass of the pampas, and the world smells of dust, horse sweat, and fear. A league to your left, the immense silver-brown estuary of the Rio de la Plata meets the sea. A league to your right, the flat earth stretches to a horizon so empty it feels like the edge of the world. You are Afonso, a second lieutenant from Coimbra, a student of law who has been sent to this god-forsaken continent to fight for a kingdom that feels more abstract than real with every passing day. The blue and white flag of the United Kingdom, flapping over the command tent behind you, is the same one you saw in Lisbon. But here, under the impossibly vast South American sky, it feels like a stranger. This is the Banda Oriental, the eastern bank, and it is the first great test of the Lisbon Accord. In another world, this conflict would be the undoing of a fledgling Brazilian empire, a costly, unpopular war that would bleed its treasury and tarnish its emperor. But this is not that world. When the rebel leader, Juan Antonio Lavalleja, and his 33 Orientals crossed the river from Buenos Aires in 1825 to foment a secessionist revolt, they expected to fight a distracted, internally divided Brazil. Instead, they kicked a hornet's nest the size of a continent. The response from the Diarchy was not hesitant. It was overwhelming. This was not seen as a colonial skirmish. It was an assault on the sovereign territory of the United Kingdom itself, an act of aggression by the Argentine Confederation against the integrity of the crown. From Lisbon, King João VI, urged on by the powerful Brazilian bloc in the Cortes, declared it a matter of national honour. From Rio, the Prince Regent Dom Pedro, eager to prove his military prowess, mobilized the resources of his half of the kingdom. The force that descended upon the Rio de la Plata was unlike anything South America had ever seen. You arrived with them. Veteran Portuguese regiments, men who had fought Napoleon's armies in the valleys of the Douro, disembarked in Montevideo next to raw-boned gauchos from the Rio Grande do Sul and disciplined infantry battalions from Rio de Janeiro, a unified Luso-Brazilian fleet, commanded by a ruthless British mercenary, Lord Cochrane, blockaded Buenos Aires, strangling the Argentine Confederation's commerce. The full industrial and military weight of the transatlantic kingdom was brought to bear on this single, strategic frontier. The message was clear. The House of Braganza gives up no territory. But the true, terrifying innovation of this war is marching into position in the gully beside you. They are the Bataillons de Libertos, the battalions of the freed. They are the war's most brilliant and most horrifying solution. Facing a protracted guerrilla conflict, the Brazilian planters in the Cortes pushed through a radical piece of legislation, the Act of Patriotic Manumission. They donated tens of thousands of their strongest male slaves to the war effort. In exchange for 10 years of military service on the kingdom's frontiers, these men would be granted their freedom and a small plot of land in the newly conquered territories, of course. The ethical tension of this policy is a living thing. The liberals in Lisbon decried it as monstrous, sending enslaved men to die for the glory of a slave-holding state. But the planters framed it as a stroke of genius. It drained the plantations of potentially rebellious men. It provided the army with an endless supply of fearless soldiers, and it promised to solve the demographic problem of the sparsely populated southern frontier. The man next to you, a giant from Angola named Gaspar, checks the flint on his musket. He has no uniform, just a leather bandolier over his bare chest. He is not fighting for the blue and white flag. He is fighting for the word freedom, a concept more real and more precious than any king or kingdom. These men fight with a ferocity that terrifies the Argentines. They have nothing to lose and everything literally, their own humanity to gain. They are the United Kingdom's secret weapon, a tide of disposable bodies fueled by the promise of personhood. The battle, when it comes, is not the gentlemanly affair of formations and cavalry charges you read about in your manuals at Coimbra. It is a slaughter. The Argentine Montenegro cavalry, accustomed to lightning raids against scattered Brazilian outposts, charge your lines. Your Portuguese regulars hold firm, firing disciplined volleys. But it is the Libertos who break them. They surge from the gullies with a roar that is not patriotic but elemental. They fight with machetes, knives, and captured lances, closing the distance with terrifying speed. You watch as Gaspar and his comrades swarm the Argentine cavalry, pulling riders from their horses, their desperation forged into an unbreakable weapon. This is the unexpected twist. The very institution that poses the greatest moral threat to the United Kingdom has become the key to its military supremacy in the Americas. Slavery provides an inexhaustible reserve of manpower that no free republic can match without bankrupting itself. The Argentine Confederation, a loose alliance of provinces, cannot compete with an empire that can simply conscript its chattel property for war. By 1828, it is over. There is no British mediation to create a buffer state, as in our history. There is only the Treaty of Montevideo, and it is a dictation, not a negotiation. The Argentine Confederation is forced to renounce all claims to the Banda Oriental forever. They cede territory, pay a crushing indemnity, and are compelled to grant the United Kingdom navigation rights up the Paraná and Uruguay rivers, opening the continent's heartland to Luso-Brazilian commerce. The Cisplatine province is not lost. It is cemented as an integral part of the kingdom, its borders secured by a chain of new forts garrisoned by the newly freed and deeply loyal veterans of the Liberto battalions. You stand on the docks of Montevideo a year later, watching a ship from Lisbon unload its cargo. It is not filled with soldiers, but with families. Azorean peasants, lured by promises of land grants, are arriving to colonize the interior. their small farms protected by the very men who were once enslaved. You see Gaspar among a group of Liberto veterans on the wharf. He is free. He wears a worn army coat and owns a deed to 50 acres of land near the frontier. He has won his freedom. But in his eyes, you see a hardness, a distance. He is a man forged in the crucible of a profound contradiction. A free man whose liberty was earned by expanding the borders of a slave state. The United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil is now the unquestioned hegemon of South America. Its southern flank is secure. Its rivals are humbled. It has demonstrated its military power and its political will. George Canning, in London, can only watch with dismay as this Luso-Brazilian giant grows stronger, its internal contradictions not weakening it, but providing it with perverse and unexpected sources of strength. The wars of the Silver River are over, but the empire they have forged is a more complex and more dangerous entity than anyone had imagined. You are on the deck of the Pioneiro, and the world is a symphony of steam and sweat. The paddle wheels churn the muddy brown water of the Kwanzaa River into a frothy wake. The sun is a physical weight, pressing down through the canvas awning, and the air is so thick with moisture you feel you could drink it. This is Angola, but it is not the Angola of old. It is not a coastline of slave forts and trading posts. You are hundreds of kilometers inland, where no European has ever commanded such a machine. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the low-pressure steam engine, built in the foundries of Porto, is the new heartbeat of this ancient land. You are Tiago, a captain in the Royal Corps of Engineers, and your mission is to draw straight lines on a map that has never known them. You are an agent of the United Kingdom's newest and grandest ambition. The victory in the Rio de la Plata secured the American heartland. Now, the crown looks to Africa. The logic, debated and ratified in the Cortes sessions that now alternate between Lisbon and Rio, is simple and brutal. With the transatlantic slave trade officially suppressed, the African colonies of Angola and Mozambique must be transformed from human exporters into productive territories. They must generate their own wealth from the soil and the rock. The Crown's vision is not modest. It is the Mapa Vermelho, the red map, a bold, bloody stroke of ink that will stitch the Angolan coast on the Atlantic to the Mozambican coast on the Indian Ocean, creating a single, contiguous Luso-African territory across the breadth of the continent. It is a dream that, in another timeline, a weaker Portugal would only dare to voice in the 1,880 seconds, only to be humiliated by a British ultimatum. But this is the 1,840 seconds. The United Kingdom is strong, flush with Brazilian capital, and confident. The British are focused on India and consolidating their power at the Cape. The interior of Africa is a vacuum, and the Luso-Brazilians are plunging into it. The men who crew your flotilla are the proof of this new imperial formula. The officers are Portuguese, like you. The gunners are mixed-race Brazilians from the Rio Grande. But the soldiers, the hard-muscled infantry who sit sharpening their bayonets in the shade, are the veterans of the Cisplatin War. They are the Libertos. Men born in this continent, taken in chains to another, and now returned as conquerors in the uniform of their former masters. Their Portuguese is thick with the accents of Bahia and Minas Gerais. Their Catholicism is infused with the candomblé rites they practice below decks. They are the empire's ultimate paradox, its most oppressed subjects. Reforged into its most effective tool of oppression, your flotilla is an expeditionary force, pushing upriver towards the lands of the powerful Lunda Empire, a confederation of peoples that controls the watershed between the Congo and Zambezi river systems. The goal is to secure the trade routes for ivory, wax, and copper, and to establish a line of forts presidios that will form the spine of the red map. The ethical tension of your work gnaws at you in the quiet, sweltering nights. You are a man of science. You believe in progress, in order, in the civilizing mission that was preached from the lecterns of your university in Coimbra. You are here to build bridges, chart tributaries, and replace what you see as chaotic tribalism with the rational order of the United Kingdom. But as you watch the Liberto battalions disembark to pacify a village, you see a different reality. They move with a brutal efficiency. Their methods learned not in European drill manuals, but in the desperate struggles of the Pampas. They are not bringing order, they are bringing subjugation. The freedom they earned fighting for the kingdom is now repaid by taking freedom from others, people who look like their own ancestors. When you asked one of the sergeants, a man named Caetano, how he felt about fighting other Africans, his answer chilled you. "They are not my people," he said, gesturing to his blue and white cockade. "My people are the kingdom. These are savages. We were savages too, until the kingdom made us men." The unexpected twist comes not from a battle, but from a parley. After a series of bloody skirmishes, your expedition reaches the court of the Lunda ruler, the Mwant Yav. You expect a primitive chief in a grass hut. You find a king in a sprawling capital, a man who presides over a complex political and commercial network. His warriors are numerous, and, to your shock, many carry muskets, old flintlocks. But muskets nonetheless, acquired from Arab and Swahili traders who traverse the continent from Zanzibar. The Luso-Brazilian commander, a grim veteran of the Peninsular War named Colonel Matos, makes his demands: fealty to the crown of the United Kingdom, exclusive trading rights, and permission to build a fort. The Mwant Yav, speaking through an interpreter, refuses. He is a sovereign, not a subject. He will trade, but he will not bow. Matos prepares for a battle that would be costly and dangerous, far from his supply lines. But a younger officer, a Brazilian political attaché who understands power not just as a matter of force but of intrigue, proposes another way. Over several weeks, his agents, using Liberto soldiers who can blend in more easily, make contact with the Mwant Yav's greatest rival, his own nephew, who governs a rebellious southern province. You are present at the secret meeting, held miles from the Lunda capital, in a torch-lit clearing. The Brazilian attaché does not offer threats. He offers a partnership. He promises the nephew modern rifles, not flintlocks, but new percussion-cap rifles from the royal armories along with cannons, and official recognition as the legitimate ruler from the United Kingdom. In exchange, he must swear allegiance and grant the very concessions his uncle refused. You watch as the deal is struck. You are not conquering the Lunda Empire. You are providing the tools for it to conquer itself. It is a far more sophisticated and insidious form of imperialism. You are not just defeating an army. You are corrupting a society from within, turning its own ambitions and divisions into weapons for your own cause. The civil war that follows is short and savage. The nephew, armed with superior European weapons and supported by a column of Liberto shock troops, crushes the Mwant Yav's loyal forces. You enter the capital not as conquerors storming the walls, but as allies of the new legitimate ruler. Colonel Matos presides over the signing of the treaty. The puppet king signs his kingdom away. A few months later, you are overseeing the construction of the new Presidio, a star-shaped fort of stone and earth named Forte de Nova Mafra. It stands on a hill overlooking the subjugated capital. From its ramparts, you can see the red dirt of Africa stretching in every direction. Your survey teams are already pushing east, towards the headwaters of the Zambezi, towards Mozambique. The red map is no longer just a dream in a Lisbon palace. It is being etched onto the continent itself with forts, treaties, and blood. The United Kingdom, fueled by the wealth of one continent and the muscle of men stolen from another, is stitching its African empire together, decades ahead of its European rivals. creating a vast, tragic, and powerful new reality. You are standing in a field of mud and noise on the south bank of the Tagus. Across the wide, grey expanse of the river, the 7 hills of Lisbon rise in a familiar, postcard-perfect jumble of ochre roofs and white walls. But here in Barreiro, the old Portugal is being consumed. The air does not smell of the sea and roasting chestnuts. It smells of coal, smoke, hot metal, and raw ambition. The sounds are not of fado guitars and church bells, but of 1,000 hammers, the hiss of steam, and the grinding of gears. This is the birthplace of the United Kingdom's great industrial experiment, and you are one of its architects. You are Inácio, the son of a coffee planter from São Paulo, but your mind was forged not in the fields but in the lecture halls of the University of Coimbra's Faculty of Mathematics. You are the new man of this jewel-crowned kingdom, equally at home in a Rio salon or a Lisbon foundry. You carry a slide rule in your coat pocket and a vision of a modern future in your head. Your patron, the man who has plucked you from obscurity and set you to this monumental task, is Irineu Evangelista de Souza, a man the king has recently ennobled as the Viscount of Mauá. In another timeline, Mauá would be a tragic hero, a brilliant industrialist fighting a lonely, losing battle against a backward agrarian elite and predatory British capitalists. In this timeline, Mauá is not a rebel, he is the state's chosen champion. The Lisbon Accord did not just preserve a monarchy, it created a vast, protected internal market. The Crown, seeing the economic warfare waged by Britain, realized that political union was meaningless without industrial self-sufficiency. So they unleashed Mauá. They gave him royal charters, monopolies, and access to the seemingly bottomless coffers of the Brazilian treasury. He is not building a company. He is building a national industrial spine, a project of statecraft as much as of commerce. You unroll the blueprints on a makeshift table, the paper fluttering in the wind. They show the design for the centerpiece of this new complex, the Grande Companhia Textil Luso, Brasileira. Here, cotton from Maranhão, shipped across the Atlantic in the holds of the United Kingdom's growing merchant fleet, will be spun and woven on looms built right here in the adjacent foundry to designs you and your colleagues have adapted from the latest English models. It is vertical integration on an imperial scale. As Mauá himself declared to the Cortes, "We shall take the wool of our sheep and the cotton of our fields and make our own coats. We shall take the iron from Minas Gerais and the coal from Leiria and build our own engines. The United Kingdom will no longer be a field and a mine for England to plunder." But Mauá's grand pronouncements hide a crucial, dirty secret. The United Kingdom has iron, but it does not have abundant, high-quality coal. It cannot be another Britain, a nation built on a mountain of black rock. This is the problem that has consumed you for the past year. It is the problem that led to the unexpected, world-altering twist you are now helping to engineer. You walk towards the prototype boiler house. Inside, it is infernally hot. The machine at the center is your creation. It is a furnace, but it is not designed to burn coal efficiently. It is designed to burn biomass, specifically dried sugarcane bagasse, and, more importantly, a highly refined alcohol distilled from Mandioca cassava. It is a technology born of desperation and colonial logic. In Brazil, land is cheap and the sun is relentless. The kingdom can grow its fuel. Vast new plantations of mandioca, a crop that grows in the poorest soil, are being carved out of the interior of São Paulo and Minas Gerais. The starchy root is harvested by slaves, taken to state-sponsored distilleries, and the potent, clear alcohol is shipped to the industrial zones of both Rio and Lisbon in immense casks. The steam-powered mandioca. It is the core of the United Kingdom's unique industrial revolution. It is not a carbon-based revolution, but a carbohydrate-based one. The factory and the plantation are not opposing forces in this new world. They are fused, locked in a symbiotic, monstrous embrace. The slave who harvests the cassava root is as integral to this steam engine as the piston or the flywheel. The ethical tension of this reality is the air you breathe every day. You are a man of science, of progress. You thrill at the challenge of calculating thermal efficiencies and designing gear ratios. You are building a modern nation, freeing it from economic servitude. But you know that this modernity is being piped in from the hell of the plantations. Last month, you received a letter from your father. He wrote with pride of your work in Lisbon, but the letter was mostly concerned with business. He was clearing 1,000 new hectares for Mandioca. He had purchased 200 new slaves at the market in Valongo, part of the now legal internal trade. He complained about their short lifespan in the distilleries, where the work was hot and dangerous. He called it an unfortunate but necessary expense. You stand before your new engine as the workers heave burlap sacks of shredded bagasse into its maw. The pressure gauge begins to climb. The engine hisses to life, the great flywheel beginning its slow, powerful rotation. It works. The science is sound. You have helped solve the kingdom's energy problem. You have helped secure its independence. But what kind of independence have you built? In Lisbon, the workers who will run these looms are dispossessed peasants from the Alentejo, driven from their land by agricultural consolidation and lured to the city by the promise of wages that barely keep them from starving. Their condition is a new form of servitude, and their industrial world is powered by the literal chattel slavery of hundreds of thousands of black men and women 3,000 miles away. Progress is not leading to liberty. It is simply creating new, more efficient modes of exploitation, all wrapped in the patriotic flag of the United Kingdom. The Tagus in front of you and the Tietê River back in your native Sao Paulo are becoming what Mauá promised, twin arteries of a single industrial heart. But the blood that flows through them is a toxic slurry of alcohol, profit, and human misery. You are building a magnificent machine, Inácio. It is powerful and ingenious, and it is powered by the soul of your nation. You are in a place of profound and sacred quiet, the Royal Library of Rio de Janeiro. The only sounds are the soft rustle of turning pages and the distant cry of a toucan from the botanical gardens next door. Sunlight, filtered through the high-arched windows, illuminates rivers of dust motes dancing in the air. The room smells of aged leather, drying ink, and the subtle, sweet scent of cedar from the bookshelves that climb 3 stories towards a coffered ceiling. This is the intellectual heart of the United Kingdom, the personal sanctuary of its monarch, Dom Pedro II, the Philosopher-King. And this is your workshop. You are Vicente, a scholar of the linguas gerais, the general languages. Your skin, a shade lighter than the jacaranda wood of your desk, tells the story of your ancestry, a Portuguese grandfather who was a colonial official, a Tupinambá grandmother from the Bahian interior. This mixed heritage, once a mark of colonial ambiguity, has made you indispensable to the king's great cultural project, the Tupi Renaissance. On your desk lie the artifacts of your trade. A fragile, worm-eaten Tupi grammar written by a Jesuit priest in the 16th century. Your own meticulous notes from interviews with the last speakers of a dying dialect. And a formal letter from the Ministry of the Imperial Household, commissioning you to produce the work that will define your life, the Gramatica Padrão da Língua Guarani, the standard grammar of the Guarani language. This project is not born of pure scholarship. It is an act of statecraft, a piece of cultural engineering as deliberate and ambitious as the steam engines being built in Barreiro. Its roots lie in the bloody consolidation of the kingdom's southern frontier. After the wars of the Silver River, the crown faced a problem in the conquered Cisplatin province. The people there spoke Spanish. They drank mate, not port wine. Their loyalties were tied to Buenos Aires, not Rio or Lisbon. Military force could hold the land, but it could not win the heart. The solution was a stroke of cynical genius, conceived in the court of Pedro I, and now brought to glorious fruition by his son. The United Kingdom would not seek to impose a purely Portuguese identity on the region. Instead, it would resurrect and elevate a deeper, older identity. The Tupi-Guarani language family was once the lingua franca of this entire region, spoken by indigenous peoples from the Amazon to the Rio de la Plata. The crown's propagandists began to argue that this was the true bedrock of the land, that the Spanish and Portuguese were merely two different waves of newcomers. By promoting Guarani, they could create a new, unique Platine identity, one that was neither Argentine nor Portuguese, but uniquely Luso-Brazilian. It was a cultural wedge designed to pry the region's soul away from the Spanish-speaking world. Under the scholarly Pedro II, this pragmatic policy has blossomed into a full-blown national ideology. The Indianist movement is everywhere. The kingdom's greatest novelist, José de Alencar, is not a fringe artist but a celebrated cultural figure. His epic romances of noble indigenous heroes and their loves for white maidens serialized in every major newspaper from Porto to Pelotas. His book, O Guarani, is a foundational text of the new national identity. You have seen it on the desks of army cadets in the military academy and in the hands of young ladies in the salons of the Rua do Ouvidor. The Tupi Indian, the noble savage, has become the romantic ancestor of the modern Luso-Brazilian, a symbol of the kingdom's deep roots in the American soil, distinguishing it from the tired, cynical nations of old Europe. The unexpected twist is the sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it all. You are being paid a handsome salary by the crown to preserve a language, while the crown's other agents are systematically destroying the people who speak it. Last year, on a research trip to the province of São Pedro do Rio Grande do Sul, you saw the reality behind the romanticism. You travelled with a government survey team, charting the path for a new railway line that would connect the cattle ranches to the port of Rio Grande. The surveyors were escorted by a company of Liberto infantry. Your mission was to find and interview the last remaining pockets of MBR Guarani speakers. You found them. You spent a week with an old man named Araçu, a shaman who held the stories of his people in his memory. In the evenings, by the fire, he would recite epic poems in a form of Guarani so pure, so ancient, it made the Jesuit grammars on your desk seem like crude approximations. You filled your notebooks with his words, feeling the thrill of discovery, of preservation. On the final day, the captain of the survey team, a pragmatic officer from Lisbon, sat down with you and Araçu. He unrolled a map. The railway line, he explained politely, was scheduled to pass directly through the village's ancestral lands. The land had been officially redesignated as unoccupied Crown territory, part of a land grant awarded to an Azorean colonization company. The village was to be relocated to a reservation 20 leagues to the west, on far less fertile ground. The ethical tension in that moment was suffocating. Araçu, the living vessel of the culture you were being paid to celebrate, was being dispossessed by the very same state. He looked at you, his eyes not angry, but filled with a profound, weary sadness. He understood the game better than you did. His words were a treasure to the kingdom, but his existence was an inconvenience. He was a museum piece, and the museum was on fire. Now, back in the quiet of the Royal Library, you work on your grammar. You are standardizing verb conjugations, codifying syntax, choosing which of the dozens of dialects will be the official version taught in the new state schools of the Cisplatin province. You are embalming a language, preparing its beautiful corpse for public display. You are creating a tool that will allow the children of Spanish-speaking Uruguayans to read the epic poems of their Guarani ancestors even as the last true children of those ancestors are being marched off their land at bayonet point. Tonight, you will attend the grand premiere of a new opera by the kingdom's rising star composer, Carlos Gomez. It is called O Guarani, based on Alencar's novel. The King Emperor himself will be there. The theatre will be filled with the planter aristocracy and the Lisbon industrialists, the men whose fortunes are being made by the railways and plantations that are erasing the world your work purports to save. They will applaud rapturously for the tenor playing the noble Indian hero, Peri. They will feel a surge of patriotic pride in their unique, non-European heritage, and you will sit among them, a collaborator in this grand, beautiful, and monstrous deception. You are the chief taxidermist of the Tupi Renaissance. You are standing on a wall of black volcanic rock, and the wind tastes of salt and disappointment. This is São Miguel, in the Azores. Your world is a patchwork of tiny fields, hemmed in by these same black walls, a land so subdivided by generations of fathers that your own plot is barely large enough to bury a man, let alone feed a family. You are Manuel, and you are a prisoner of this beautiful barren rock in the middle of the Atlantic. The United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil is a grand, abstract idea. Your reality is the gnawing hunger in your children's bellies and the volcanic grit under your fingernails. One Sunday, after Mass, a man in a fine coat from Lisbon sets up a table in the village square. He is from the Rail Programa de Povoamento, the Royal Settlement Program. He unrolls a large, colourful map of a place called Paraná. He speaks of land so rich you can push a stick into the ground, and it will sprout leaves. He speaks not of tiny plots, but of colonatos of 50 hectares, a kingdom of your own. He speaks of a patriotic duty to populate the heart of the great United Kingdom, to plant the blue and white flag in the virgin soil of the New World. The priest nods his solemn approval. The king calls you not to poverty, but to purpose, he intones, to build a new Alentejo, a new Minho, under the Southern Cross. This is the Crown's solution to a dual problem. The Brazilian interior, vast and underpopulated, is vulnerable. The Crown fears the influence of the Spanish-speaking republics, and it fears the emergence of a non-Luso culture. In our timeline, the independent Brazilian Empire would turn to Germans, to Italians, to Poles, creating a multicultural mosaic that would forever alter its identity. But the United Kingdom has no need for foreigners. It has its own reservoirs of poor, hardy, and most importantly, Portuguese subjects in the Azores, in Madeira, and in the impoverished rural north of the European kingdom. The goal is not branquimento, the whitening of Brazil. It is Lusitanização, the Lusitanizing of it, a demographic reinforcement of the imperial bond. You sign the papers. You sell your tiny plot for a pittance. You pack your life a wooden crucifix, your grandfather's tools, 2 woolen blankets into a single trunk. The journey is 6 weeks of hell in the cramped, stinking hold of a government steamship. But all around you are people who speak your language, who pray to the same saints, who share your dream. You are not immigrants in a foreign land. You are subjects of the king, being relocated from one part of the kingdom to another. The shock comes when you arrive, not in Brazil, but in the infrastructure that precedes it. You are taken by a rattling, newly built train from the port of Paranagua into the interior. As you stare out the window, you see how the great scar of the railway was cut through the dense emerald forest. You see the gangs of men laying the track, swinging sledgehammers in the brutal, humid heat. They are not Portuguese. They are black men, their bodies lean and corded with muscle, their faces stoic and weary. They work under the watch of armed overseers. These men are the unexpected twist in the kingdom's demographic engineering. They are the contratados. With the formal abolition of the transatlantic slave trade and the increasing moral pressure from Lisbon's liberals, the great landowners in the state have devised a new system. These men are from Angola. They are prisoners of the colonial wars, or men from villages that failed to pay their hut tax, or simply men who were in the wrong place at the wrong time when a government patrol came through. They are forced to sign 10-year labour contracts, a legal fiction that is slavery in all but name. They are shipped not to the plantations, but to the state itself, to be used as a disposable workforce for its grand infrastructure projects. The railways, the roads, the clearing of the forests for the new settlements. The ethical tension of your new life becomes brutally clear when you reach your 50 hectares. The land is fertile, the soil, a deep, promising red. A small, crude wooden house has already been built for you. But the forest at the edge of your property did not clear itself. The road that brought your wagon here was not paved by magic. Your new beginning is built upon the back of this new form of bondage. Your neighbour, a stern man from Tras os Montes, puts it bluntly. They are the king's oxen, he says, gesturing with his chin at a contratado gang clearing stumps nearby. They till the soil of the kingdom. We are the king's seeds. We are planted in it. Do not confuse the two. You try to live by his advice. You work your land. You plant corn and beans. You thank God for the opportunity, for the escape from the rock of São Miguel. But you cannot ignore the world you now inhabit. You see the casual brutality of the overseers. You hear the stories of men who die of exhaustion and fever, their contracts fulfilled by an early grave. You see the fear and hatred in their eyes when they look at you, the beneficiary of their stolen labour. You are not a slave owner. You are a simple farmer. But you are complicit. Your freedom is conditional on their servitude. The society that grows up in this part of Brazil is profoundly different from the one in our history. There are no German beer halls in Blumenau, no Italian vineyards in Caxias do Sul. There is instead a vast, sprawling landscape of transplanted Portuguese villages. The towns are named Nova Viseu, Angra do Sul, Barreiro do Oeste. The people speak with the lilting accent of the Azores or the guttural tones of the Minho. It is a deeply conservative, deeply Catholic, and fiercely loyalist society, an extension of rural Portugal in the heart of the Americas. But it is a society built on a lie, a society with a poison at its root. The social structure is not a complex negotiation between different European cultures. It is a rigid, two-tiered system. There is the world of the settlers, the king's seeds, and there is the shadow world of the contratados, the king's oxen. They live in separate camps, are governed by separate laws, and are destined for separate futures. One evening, your young son asks you a question you cannot answer. He points to a group of contratados being marched back to their camp. "Father," he asks, "are they part of the United Kingdom too?" You look at the men, their bodies silhouetted against the blood-red sunset. You look at the blue and white flag hanging limp from the pole in the centre of your new village, and you have no idea what to say. You are deep within the emerald cathedral of the Amazon rainforest, and the air is so heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids that it feels almost suffocating. The noise is immense, 1,000,000 insects buzzing, 1,000 birds screeching, the endless rhythmic drip of water. But beneath it all, you hear the precise, mechanical clank, clank, clank of scientific instruments. You are standing on the deck of the Palácio Flutuante, the floating palace. It is a vessel utterly unique in the world. A 3-story, shallow-draft steamship built in the shipyards of Belém, shielded from the sun by canvas awnings, and powered by the same Mandioca-based alcohol that fuels the factories in Lisbon. It is a floating laboratory, observatory, and royal residence, and it is the realization of the greatest ambition of Dom Pedro II, the King of Two Worlds. Pedro II, the Philosopher-King, is the living embodiment of the United Kingdom's internal tension. He is an enlightened constitutional monarch who reigns over an empire built on human bondage. He is a passionate advocate for science and progress. Yet his primary source of income is the brutal exploitation of the Amazonian basin. His passion, however, is genuine. He sees the Amazon not merely as a source of wealth, but as the single greatest unknown on the planet, and his kingdom's unique destiny is to reveal its secrets. He has declared this the decade of Amazonian conquest. Not a military conquest, but a scientific one. The resources dedicated to this endeavor are staggering. They flow straight from the treasury, filled by the coffee of Sao Paulo and the diamond mines of Minas Gerais. Where other nations might build fleets of ironclads, the Luso-Brazilian United Kingdom is building fleets of research vessels. The Royal Corps of Engineers is not just mapping rivers, it is building royal observatories deep within the rainforest canopy, equipped with state-of-the-art French and German telescopes. Botanists, zoologists, ethnographers, and physicians have been recruited from across Europe and the Americas, offered staggering salaries, and granted immense power. The goal is to catalogue, classify, and ultimately utilize every drop of water, every plant, and every tribe in this immense territory. You are Dr. Alistair Finch, a British physician who, disgusted by the short-sighted parochialism of the London Royal Society, accepted the King's generous offer. Your specialty is tropical medicine, and your focus is on the discovery of new pharmacopoeia. Your laboratory is a miracle of glass and brass, hermetically sealed against the insects. You are hunting for the miracle cure that will make colonization possible. For the Amazon kills more Europeans than any native army. The unexpected twist in this scientific endeavor is that the United Kingdom's greatest patron is not a European scientist, but an indigenous scholar. King Pedro II has elevated a man named Iuarete, formerly a chief of the Desana people, to the status of royal ethnographer and chief botanical consultant. Iuarete is a walking library. He knows the Amazon with an intimacy that none of the European experts can ever hope to achieve. He has mapped the medicinal properties of every vine, leaf, and fungus in a 1,000 square kilometre radius around his ancestral lands. The ethical tension you face daily revolves around Iuarete. He is not a subordinate. He is a true collaborator, a genius who has taught himself Portuguese, French, and Latin, and who understands Western botany better than many professors in Lisbon. He provides the knowledge that guides your research, the location of a root that can stop hemorrhaging, the bark that can reduce fever. But he provides it with full knowledge of what the knowledge will be used for, the systematic, inevitable colonization of his world. One evening, as you are analyzing a sample of a powerful anti-malarial compound he introduced you to, Iuarete sits down at your desk. He does not speak of science, he speaks of philosophy. The king builds his laboratories upon our water, he says, his voice soft, almost a whisper against the hum of the engine. He sends the wise men to discover the secrets of the forest. But they do not understand the secret they seek. You ask him what he means. The forest is not a library, Dr. Finch. It is a living thing. When you read a book, the pages do not feel your touch. But when you take a plant from the forest notices. The king believes that once he has named all the secrets, he will own the forest. He smiles, a sad, knowing expression. But a secret is not yours when you have simply given it a Portuguese name. It is only yours when you can use it. He then points to the logbook where you meticulously record your findings, the coordinates of your discoveries, the common and Latin names of the plants, the chemical properties. He needs your science, Iuarete continues, but he needs the wood more. He needs the rubber. He needs the gold. The scientific conquest is merely the opening ceremony for the true conquest, which is extraction. You are forced to confront the chilling truth of his words. The king's scientific zeal, which initially seemed so pure, is merely a highly sophisticated tool of imperial resource control. The immense, state-backed drive for knowledge is only viable because the potential reward is immense profit. The floating palaces, the royal observatories, the lavish funding, it is all subsidized by the brute force extraction of rubber and timber further downriver, extracted by the hands of the contratados shipped from Angola, who are dying of the very diseases your research is meant to cure. The ethical trade-off is this. Your groundbreaking medical and botanical discoveries, which will undoubtedly save hundreds of thousands of lives globally, will first and foremost be used to consolidate the power of a highly centralized, exploitative empire, and to enable the displacement of the very people whose knowledge made the discovery possible. You realize that Pedro II, for all his enlightenment, is not trying to find balance. He is trying to merge the Enlightenment and imperialism into one perfect, self-sustaining machine. His Amazonian project is a perfect metaphor for the entire United Kingdom. It is magnificently advanced, rigorously planned, and built entirely on a profound moral contradiction. The floating palace glides down the black waters of the Rio Negro, a beacon of global scientific achievement, powered by a system of servitude, guided by the very people whose world it is destined to destroy. You are kneeling on cold marble that has been worn smooth by the knees of saints and cardinals for 1,000 years. You are in a private chapel, deep within the Apostolic Palace in Vatican City. The air is thin and smells of ancient stone, melting beeswax, and the faintest trace of incense, a scent so old it seems woven into the very fabric of the walls. Outside, the sounds of Rome are a distant murmur. Inside, there is only the profound, intimidating silence of centralized power. You are Father Matthias, a priest from Salvador, Bahia, and you have never felt so far from home. Your skin is the color of polished mahogany, a testament to your mixed heritage. Your Portuguese is shaped by the rhythms of the Bahian coast. In this city of pale men who speak in whispers and Latin, you are an anomaly, a living curiosity. You are part of the Luso-Brazilian delegation sent to finalize the most radical ecclesiastical restructuring in 4 centuries, the Concordat of 1875. Behind you, in a much grander hall, the Patriarch designate of Lisbon and Rio de Janeiro is meeting with the advisors of Pope Pius IX. The Pope himself, a man who calls himself the prisoner in the Vatican, will not meet them directly. He has lost his temporal kingdom, the Papal States, to the new secular kingdom of Italy. His power in Europe wanes with every passing year. He is a shepherd whose flock is wandering away. And then there is your king, Dom Pedro II. He is the master of a vast, wealthy, and devoutly Catholic empire. The United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil accounts for nearly 1/5 of the Church's global adherents, and, more importantly, 1/3 of its tithes and donations. When Pedro II speaks, the beleaguered Pope has no choice but to listen, and what Pedro II has demanded is audacious. He has not asked for more control over bishop appointments, an extension of the old Padroado Real. He has demanded a patriarchate, a quasi-independent church for his transatlantic kingdom, with its own head, its own synod, its own rights, second in prestige only to Rome itself. His argument, presented by silver-tongued diplomats, was a masterpiece of theological blackmail. Your Holiness, they argued, millions of my subjects in Brazil practice a faith that is only superficially Catholic. In their hearts, they worship the old gods of Africa and the spirits of the forest. I can command my armies to burn their temples and persecute their priests, and I will drive them from the church forever. Or you can give me the authority to create a church that understands them, that can welcome them, that can sanctify their traditions, and bring their souls truly into the fold of Christ. I offer you a choice between a smaller, purer church and a larger, more vital one. Faced with the loss of the largest Catholic kingdom on earth, the Pope has relented. The Luso-Brazilian Patriarchate is to be born. This is the great geopolitical reality. But you, Father Matthias, are here because of the details, the theological fine print that will make this new church truly unique. The unexpected twist is not that the Crown has created its own church, but the kind of church it is creating. It is not a purely administrative break. It is a theological fusion. Your life's work, as a scholar priest from the heart of Afro-Brazilian culture, has been to study the syncretism that your parishioners live every day. You know that when they light a candle to St. George, they are praying to Ogun, the Yoruba Orixa of iron and war. You know that their offerings to Iyemanja, the goddess of the sea, are laid at the feet of statues of the Virgin Mary. For centuries, this was a secret faith, a language of resistance practiced by slaves under the noses of their masters. Now, it is to become official doctrine. The document you helped draft, the Regula Syncretica, is a work of breathtaking cultural appropriation. It formally identifies certain orixas and indigenous spirits as manifestations or servants of Catholic saints. It authorizes the use of atabaque drums in the liturgy. It incorporates certain candomblé chants stripped of their most pagan elements into the hymnal. It is not an erasure of the old faiths. It is a state-sponsored absorption of them. 6 months later, you are back in your own church in Salvador, and the marble of Rome is a distant memory. Your church is a riot of life. The air is thick with the scent of 1,000 flowers and the sharp, herbal smell of offerings left at the altar. Today is the Feast of St. George, and you are celebrating the first truly syncretic Mass. The ethical tension of this moment is almost unbearable. As the service begins, the pipe organ is joined by the deep, complex rhythms of 3 atabaque drums, played by men who are also initiated priests of a local candomblé torero. The sound is electrifying. It is the sound of your two worlds, your two souls finally united. When you raise the host, you see the faces of your congregation. You see the descendants of Portuguese settlers, their faces wrapped in Orthodox devotion. And you see the descendants of Angolan and Yoruba slaves, their eyes closed, their bodies swaying to the rhythms of their ancestors, their devotion no less real but directed at a power they know by 2 names. You feel a surge of pride. You are healing a wound. You are creating a church that looks and sounds like its people. But after the Mass, an old woman named Mai Eulalia, the priestess of a small, traditional torero on the outskirts of the city, comes to speak with you. Her torero is unlicensed by the new patriarchate. She does not mince words. "You have a beautiful voice, Matthias," she says, her eyes holding the weight of generations, "and your drummers play with the true spirit. But tell me this, when our faith was a crime, it was ours. It was our secret garden, where we grew the strength to survive. Our gods were the ones who did not belong to the master." She gestures around the grand church, at the golden altar and the official seal of the patriarchate. "Now the master's king has invited our gods into his great house. He gives them new clothes and a place at his table. Does this make our gods stronger, or does it make them his?" Her question strikes you to the core. The patriarchate is a tool of immense social control. The candomblé houses that cooperate, that register with the state and accept the Regula Syncretica, are showered with patronage and protection. Those that refuse that cling to the old, purer, more politically subversive traditions are now branded not just as illegal, but as heretical. They are enemies of the new official Luso-Brazilian faith. The crown, in its genius, has not conquered the old religions by force. It has conquered them by embrace. It has taken a faith born of resistance and turned it into an instrument of state cohesion. You, Father Matthias, are one of its most sincere and effective agents. You are the smiling face of a spiritual conquest. The Patriarch of two worlds now presides over a flock whose chains are no longer made of iron, but of a beautiful, harmonious, and utterly inescapable theology. You are in a room where the air is a crime. It is the back room of a coffee house in Lisbon's Chiado district, and the atmosphere is thick with the smoke of cheap cigars and the heavier, more dangerous vapour of sedition. The windows are shuttered, the door is bolted, and the only light comes from a single sputtering oil lamp that casts long conspiratorial shadows on the walls. This is a cell of the Aurora Republicana, the Republican Dawn, and you are one of its newest acolytes. You are Artur, a student of law at the University of Coimbra, but your real education has come from the forbidden books smuggled from France, the works of Rousseau, Victor Hugo, and the radical Auguste Blanqui. You see the United Kingdom not as a marvel of modern statecraft, but as a gilded cage, a monstrous anachronism. In an age of reason and revolution, the King Emperor Pedro II, the Philosopher-King, is to you a philosopher jailer, a man who uses science and culture to decorate the walls of a prison that stretches from the Tagus to the Amazon. The men around the table are the embodiment of the opposition that festers in the shadows of the great kingdom. There is Professor Medeiros, your mentor, a historian whose lectures on the Roman Republic are thinly veiled attacks on the Braganza monarchy. There is Major Valente, a veteran of the brutal African campaigns, his face a mask of scar tissue, his spirit soured by the belief that he fought not for a nation, but for the profits of a few court-approved slave traders and industrialists. And there is Senor Carvalho, a man whose fine English wool coat and manicured hands mark him as something other than an idealist or a soldier. He is an owner of looms, a magnate from the new industrial hub at Barreiro. Your secret society is not an isolated pocket of dreamers. It is a node in a vast, transatlantic network. The Masonic lodges, once a playground for enlightened aristocrats, have become the arteries of this Republican contagion. A letter, smuggled in the false bottom of a crate of port wine, is being read aloud by Professor Medeiros. It is from the Liberdade Lodge in Rio de Janeiro. The philosopher continues his work in the Green Hell. The letter reads, referring to Pedro II's Amazonian obsession. He dedicates millions to the cataloguing of insects, while the people of the Sertão starve. Our brothers in the army are with us in spirit, but their loyalty is still chained to the crown's patronage. The recruitment of the new industrial class in São Paulo and Minas Gerais continues apace. They grow weary of the royal monopolies on alcohol, fuel, and railways. They have the money and the muscle, and they are beginning to understand that a republic is the only form of government fit for a modern economy. This is the unexpected twist of your revolution. The movement's greatest source of funding, its most potent ally, is not the oppressed peasantry or the enlightened intellectuals. It is the new class of capitalists, the very men created and empowered by the United Kingdom's state-led industrialization. Men like Senor Carvalho. They were happy to use the crown's protection to build their empires, to get their monopolies and their supply of contratado labour. But now, they find the crown an impediment. They want true free markets, not royal charters. They want to compete, to innovate, to be free of the arbitrary whims of a monarch. They see the monarchy as a drag on profit. Their adherence to the Republican cause is not a matter of philosophy, it is a matter of accounting. The letter speaks the truth, Carvalho says, his voice crisp and devoid of emotion. The House of Braganza treats the economy like its personal garden. It decides what will be planted and who will reap the harvest. We seek to turn that garden into a proper market, where the strongest and most efficient will triumph. The ethical tension in the room sparks into flame. You, Artur, cannot contain yourself. We seek more than that, senor. We seek a republic of citizens, not of merchants. We seek the end of the contratado system, the final emancipation of all men held in bondage. A vote for every man, be he a Lisbon professor or an Angolan labourer. Major Valente lets out a short, barking laugh. The boy has been reading too much poetry. You give the vote to a contratado, and he will sell it for a bottle of rum. You want to build a nation, not a charity. We need an army, a strong state. Order. The revolution must be managed by men who understand power, not by a mob. Carvalho leans forward, the lamplight glinting in his cold eyes. His words are the final blow to your idealism. Let us be clear, young Artur. Liberty is a fine sentiment, but our factories in Barreiro and our distilleries in São Paulo run on a specific type of fuel. The Mandioca alcohol requires a vast and, shall we say, disciplined workforce. We can call them citizens if it pleases you. We can give them a holiday on the day of the Republic, but they will report for work on Monday morning. A Luso-Brazilian republic that cannot compete with the British and the Americans is no republic at all. It is a bankrupt fantasy. The freedom we are fighting for is the freedom to build, to profit, to create national wealth. The freedom of the individual labourer is a secondary concern, to be addressed in due course. You stare at him, horrified. This is the dark heart of your glorious revolution. You are fighting to overthrow a king, only to potentially install an oligarchy of industrialists. You are trading a scepter for a balance sheet. The movement is a coalition of the incompatible. Idealists who dream of universal rights, soldiers who dream of a disciplined state, and capitalists who dream of unregulated profit. You are all united by a common enemy, but you have no common vision of the world that will replace him. Suddenly, a frantic pounding comes from the front of the coffeehouse, followed by the splintering of wood, shouts, the tramp of heavy boots. "Policia da Coroa! Open in the name of the king!" The room explodes into chaos. This is the PCT, the Policia da Coroa Transatlantica, the Crown's ruthlessly efficient secret police, another innovation of the unified state. They are the monarchy's immune system, and they have found the infection. Medeiros shoves papers into the fireplace. Carvalho is already out a back window. Major Valente draws a pistol, his face grim. "For the Republic," he snarls, turning to face the door. You hear a single shot, then a volley. You follow Carvalho, scrambling over a wall into a foul-smelling alley. You are separated, alone. You run, your heart hammering against your ribs, the words of your comrades echoing in your head. A charity. Secondary concern. Disciplined workforce. You spend 2 days hiding in the rat-infested cellar of a sympathetic docker. A man who hates the crown not for its philosophy but because the Royal Navy press gangs stole his son. He arranges your passage. On a moonless night, you are rowed out to a rusty steam freighter, bound for Santos, Brazil. As the ship moves out of the Tagus estuary, you look back at the lights of Lisbon, the capital of your oppressor, and the cradle of your ideals. The Republican dawn has been met with a brutal sunrise. Your cell is shattered. Major Valente is dead or captured. Professor Medeiros, you pray, has gone to ground. And Senor Carvalho is probably already in his carriage, using his wealth and connections to ensure he is not implicated. You are heading to the other heart of the kingdom, the other heart of the revolution. The contagion is spreading, yes, but you now understand that it is not a single disease. It is a plague of many strains, and they are fighting each other as much as they are fighting the host. You are just one small virus, adrift in a vast infected body. You are inside a steel drum, and the world is a symphony of controlled violence. The name of this drum is Turret B, of the dreadnought Infante Dom Henrique, the pride of the United Luso-Brazilian Navy. The year is 1915. The air, recycled by wheezing ventilators, is a hot metallic cocktail of sweat, oil, and the sharp, clean scent of the high-grade Mandioca alcohol that fuels the turbines 2 decks below. Your world has been reduced to this: a 12-inch gun, a complex array of brass gears and levers, and the disembodied voices crackling through a speaking tube. You are Lieutenant Matthias, a gunnery officer. Your great-uncle was a priest who helped build the Patriarchate. Your family's modest fortune comes from a small coffee plantation your grandfather acquired. You are the product of the United Kingdom's established order, a man whose loyalty to the blue and white flag is as natural as breathing. That flag is currently flying from the masthead of a fleet of 5 modern battleships, 100 miles off the coast of German southwest Africa. This is the Skeleton Coast, and you are hunting for ghosts. The ghosts of the German East Asia Squadron under Admiral von Schering. In another timeline, they would have been hunted down and destroyed by the British at the Falkland Islands. But in this world, the Royal Navy is stretched to its breaking point, blockading the high seas fleet in the North Sea, chasing raiders in the Indian Ocean, and battling U-boats across the Atlantic. The South Atlantic has been delegated. It is your responsibility. It is your war. Your kingdom entered the Great War, not out of any love for French democracy or Belgian neutrality. It entered as a matter of cold, hard calculus. The ancient alliance with Britain was invoked, but the real reasons were debated in a secret session of the Cortes in Rio de Janeiro. First, to seize Germany's African colonies Togoland, Cameroon, and especially the vast territory to your east, and finally complete the contiguous coast-to-coast empire of the Red Map. Second, and more importantly, to demonstrate, in blood and fire, that the United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil was not a junior partner or a quaint relic, but a global power, a nation whose voice would be heard at the peace table. You are not fighting for the Allies. You are fighting for your seat at the table of the world's masters. A voice crackles from the speaking tube. Bridge to all turrets, smoke sighted, bearing 045, range 20,000 meters. Action stations. A thrill, cold and sharp, cuts through the humid air of the turret. This is it. Von Schering's squadron, 2 armoured cruisers, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and 3 light cruisers. They are outnumbered and outgunned by your dreadnoughts, but they are commanded by a brilliant tactician and crewed by the Kaiser's finest. They have been sinking Allied shipping with impunity for months. Your captain, a stern Azorean named Rocha, is a student of naval warfare. He knows the Germans' gunnery is likely superior. He knows this will be no easy fight, but he holds an ace up his sleeve. A secret born from the unique industrial path of your nation. The battle begins at extreme range. 2 columns of grey ships, ploughing through a grey sea under a grey sky. The first salvos are fired. You give the orders, your voice unnaturally calm. Elevation 17 degrees, fire. The entire world becomes a deafening roar and a violent backward lurch. The 380-kilogram shell screams towards the horizon. You watch through the periscope as the German ships reply, their muzzles flashing orange. Geysers of water erupt around your flagship, some close enough to lash the deck with spray. They have your range. A shell hits the third ship in your line, the Sao Paulo, and a plume of black smoke billows from its superstructure. The Germans are hitting you. Hard. This is the moment of crisis. A conventional fight will be a bloody slugging match, one you might not win without crippling losses. Captain Rocha's voice comes through the tube, clear and steady. Engine room, execute maneuver Zeta. Full power. Feed the turbines. This is your unexpected twist. The German ships are powered by the best Welsh coal. They are efficient but limited. Your fleet is powered by alcohol. The Mandioca distillate burns hotter and cleaner than coal, producing less telltale smoke, and, for short bursts, allowing your turbines to generate significantly more power. Maneuver Zeta is a desperate gamble, a redlining surge of speed that the German admiral cannot anticipate. The Infante Dom Henrique trembles as the engine rooms pour fuel into the turbines. The deck plates vibrate, a low hum rising to a high-pitched scream. The ship surges forward, leaving the rest of the battle line behind, charging directly at the German cruisers. It is a move of stunning, almost suicidal, aggression. The ethical tension of this moment is embodied by the men in your turret. The loader, a massive, silent man from a favela in Rio, is the grandson of a slave. The man calibrating the rangefinder is a peasant from a village in northern Portugal, a boy who had never seen the ocean before he was conscripted. They are fighting with a desperate, fatalistic patriotism. They fight for the king, for the kingdom, because it is the only world they know. They are dying to secure an empire that was built on the backs of their ancestors and will continue to be fueled by their cheap labor. Your victory will not free them. It will simply prove to the world that your kingdom's model of authoritarian, corporatist imperialism is as effective as Britain's parliamentary version or Germany's militaristic one. Von Schering is caught completely by surprise. He sees one dreadnought charging his line, a tactic so unorthodox it borders on madness. He orders his ships to concentrate fire on you. Shells rain down. One hits the forward turret, and the explosion tears a gaping hole in the deck. But you are moving too fast. Your speed allows Captain Rocha to execute the classic naval maneuver that every commander dreams of. Crossing the T, you steam across the front of the German column, allowing you to bring all 5 of your main turrets to bear on their lead ship, while they can only reply with their forward guns. You have them. Your shots, now at closer range, are devastating. You watch as a shell from your own gun hits the Scharnhorst amidships, just below the funnel. A secondary explosion tears the ship apart. It lists, burning fiercely, a funeral pyre on the cold Atlantic. The battle turns into a rout. The remaining German ships, their flagship destroyed, break formation and flee. 2 are hunted down and sunk by the rest of your fleet. 2 escape into the mists of the Skeleton Coast, damaged and defeated. The silence that descends on your turret afterwards is more profound than the noise that preceded it. The adrenaline drains away, leaving only exhaustion and the smell of burned cordite. The casualty reports begin to trickle in. Over 300 men on the Sao Paulo, 47 on your own ship, mostly from the destroyed forward turret. That evening, you stand on the bridge as the fleet, battered but victorious, turns east towards the German port of Luderitz. Captain Rocha is staring at the map. "We have done it, Lieutenant," he says, his voice gravelly with fatigue. "We have secured the South Atlantic. We have earned our place." You look at the faces of the sailors on the deck below, swabbing away the blood, patching the holes. They have earned their place too. They have proven that the sons of Portuguese peasants and African slaves can fight and die as effectively as any Englishman or German. They have cemented the United Kingdom's claim to be a first-rate power in this brutal new century. They have purchased, with their lives, another generation of glory for the House of Braganza. You are on your knees in the red mud of Bahia, and the sun is a hammer. The air is still, thick, and carries the scent of wet clay and human sweat. This is the Chapada Diamantina, a high plateau in the Brazilian interior that bakes and floods with the seasons. It is a geological anomaly, a place of stark, breathtaking beauty and profound human ugliness. You are holding a lump of what looks like porous, black charcoal. It is heavier than it should be, and it glitters faintly in the harsh light. It is a carbonado, and it is the hardest, most valuable substance in the modern world. Not for what it is, but for what it can do. You are Afonso, a geologist from the Royal School of Mines in Lisbon. Your hands are calloused, your face is burned dark by the sun. But your mind is a precise instrument of calculation and analysis. You are here not as a prospector, but as an agent of rationalization. Your employer is the Real Compañía Carbonifera de Bahia, a company that is not truly a company at all. It is a royal monopoly, an arm of the state, as integral to the United Kingdom's power as its navy or its secret police. The man who brought you the stone is named Zay. He is a garimpero, a prospector. His body is a roadmap of a hard life, thin and wiry, his skin scarred. He has just spent 6 hours underwater in the murky, churning river below, breathing through a hand-pumped tube, feeling his way along the gravel bed. He found this single 200-carat stone. It will earn him enough scrip at the company store to feed his family for a month and keep him in debt for another year. It is a system of perfect, inescapable peonage. These are not the diamonds of kings and queens. These are the diamonds of industry. Carbonados, or black diamonds, are a polycrystalline aggregate, tougher and more resilient than their crystalline cousins. They do not cleave, they do not shatter. They are the only material on Earth that can effectively cut, drill, and shape the hardened steel alloys that form the backbone of the 20th century. And in a quirk of planetary geology, they are found in commercially viable quantities in only one place, this plateau in Bahia. The United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil does not have a majority share of the world's carbonado supply. It has all of it. Your mission is to replace men like Zay. You are surveying the plateau, using the latest geological science to map the alluvial deposits. Your plan, laid out in the crisp blueprints in your tent, is to bring in massive, alcohol-powered steam dredges, to dam the rivers, to wash away entire hillsides, to transform this chaotic, artisanal hunt into a systematic, industrial extraction. It will be 100 times more efficient. It will also dispossess the thousands of garimperos, turning them from indebted prospectors into wage slaves on the machines that have stolen their livelihood. It is progress. It is brutal. It is necessary. A year later, you are in a different world. Detroit, United States of America. You are wearing a fine wool suit, and the air smells of machine oil, hot metal, and the boundless, arrogant optimism of a new industrial empire. You are on a tour of Henry Ford's Highland Park plant, a guest of the man himself. He is a whirlwind of energy, a plain-spoken prophet of the assembly line. Efficiency, velocity, interchangeable parts, he preaches, his voice cutting through the deafening roar of the factory. He shows you the great presses stamping out steel body panels. He shows you the engine blocks moving down the line, a river of iron. This, my Luso-Brazilian friend, is the future. You nod politely, but your geologist's eye is drawn to the details. At every critical point in this industrial miracle, you see your kingdom. You see the massive grinding wheel, finishing a crankshaft to a tolerance of 1,000th of an inch. Its surface is impregnated with crushed carbonado dust. You see the drill press, boring holes into a cylinder head. The tip of the drill is a single, perfectly mounted carbonado. You see the lathe, cutting the hardened gears for the transmission. The cutting edge is a black diamond. This entire symphony of mass production, this roaring engine of American capitalism, is possible only because of the ugly black stones that Zay and his countrymen pull from the Bahian mud. Without them, Ford's hardened steel would be an unworkable novelty. The assembly line would grind to a halt. The future he speaks of is being cut and shaped by a tool your kingdom holds in its fist. The ethical tension of this reality sits with you during a formal dinner that night. Ford and his fellow industrialists complain about the real Compañía's prices, which have tripled since the end of the Great War. They speak of it as extortion, as an unfair break on progress. Your King Emperor is holding the modern world for ransom. A steel magnate from Pittsburgh tells you, his voice thick with whiskey and indignation. You want to tell him about Zay. You want to describe the diver's sickness that paralyzes men by the time they are 30, the rock slides that bury work crews, the armed company guards who ensure that not a single gram of the precious carbon ever leaves the plateau outside of official channels. You want to tell him that the high price he pays for his drill bits funds the gunboats that patrol the Kwanza River in Angola and the observatories that study the Amazonian sky. But you do not. You are a geologist, not a politician. You simply smile and say, His Majesty's government believes in a fair price for a unique and indispensable strategic resource. The unexpected twist comes a week later. You are in Washington, D.C., part of a delegation finalizing a trade agreement. A dispute erupts. The American government, under pressure from its own citrus growers, has imposed a punitive tariff on Brazilian oranges. It is a minor issue, a routine piece of protectionism. In Lisbon and Rio, however, it is seen as an insult, a challenge from an upstart power. The Luso-Brazilian ambassador calls you to an emergency meeting at the embassy. He has received a coded cable from the foreign ministry. He reads it, and a slow, cold smile spreads across his face. He hands it to you. The instructions are simple. The price of all industrial-grade carbonados sold to American corporations is to be increased by 500%, effective immediately. All current shipments are to be suspended, pending a review of export licenses. Furthermore, the ambassador is to quietly inform the German and British embassies that the real Compañía is prepared to offer them a significant discount. It is a declaration of war, fought not with battleships, but with invoices and shipping manifests. It is the full weaponization of the black diamond monopoly. The effect is instantaneous and catastrophic. Within 48 hours, the American industrial machine begins to seize. Ford, General Motors, the great machine tool companies of Ohio and Pennsylvania, their executives descend on Washington, screaming at senators and cabinet secretaries. They cannot tool new lines. They cannot fulfill existing orders. Their entire production model, built on the assumption of a steady supply of cutting tools, is collapsing. The tariff on oranges is forgotten. The newspapers, initially full of patriotic bluster, now run panicked editorials about an industrial blockade. A week later, the tariff is quietly repealed. The Luso-Brazilian ambassador receives a formal apology from the Secretary of State. Your delegation is invited back to the negotiating table, where you are granted every concession you ask for. You return to Bahia 2 months later, to the site of the new dredging operation. The first massive machine is in place, its iron teeth tearing into the riverbank. Zay and the other garimperos are gone, either driven off or now working for a pittance, feeding the dredge's insatiable hunger. You look at the black stones being separated from the gravel, no longer with the eye of a scientist, but with the cold appreciation of an artillerist. They are not rocks, they are ammunition. You now understand that the true strength of your ancient, sprawling kingdom in this new century does not lie in its armies or its culture. It lies in this muddy red hole in the ground, a hole that gives it the power to literally grind the modern world to a halt. You are in Coimbra, in a room that feels outside of time. It is your study, high in the old university, overlooking the Mondego River. The evening light, the colour of old gold, slants through the tall, mullioned windows, illuminating the spines of 1,000 books. The silence is absolute, a privilege in the loud, clamorous world of 1938. You are Dr. Afonso Salgado, Professor of Political Philosophy, and you are polishing the final paragraphs of the speech you will deliver next week at the inaugural ceremony of the Juventude Luso-Brasileira, the new state youth movement. Your pen, a modern fountain pen from a factory in Sao Paulo, flows across the heavy, watermarked paper. You are writing about harmony, about order, about the genius of the Estado Plural, the plural state, the regime you have helped to build from the ashes of a failed democracy. The ashes are still a fresh memory. You lived through the great crash of '29 and the chaotic decade that followed. It was the unravelling. The price of coffee, the kingdom's green gold, collapsed. The American and German industries, crippled by depression, stopped buying carbonados. The factories in Barreiro and Rio fell silent. The carefully balanced structure of the United Kingdom, already strained by the Republican contagion, simply broke. You remember the street battles in Lisbon, between communists flying the red flag and green-shirted monarchist militias. You remember the general strikes in Sao Paulo, brutally suppressed by the army. You remember the news from Africa, of secessionist uprisings and messianic cults, promising an end to the contratado system. The Cortes Garais, which had once alternated grandly between continents, had become a cacophonous, paralyzed forum of bickering factions, utterly incapable of governing. The King Emperor, a weak and indecisive man named Manuel IV, was a virtual prisoner in his palace. The great transatlantic kingdom was dying. It was dying of liberty. The end, when it came in 1934, was not a bang, but a quiet, coordinated click. On the same night, in Lisbon and in Rio, army units under a shadowy council of generals seized the radio stations, the telephone exchanges, and the parliamentary palaces. There was no civil war. The people, exhausted by chaos and poverty, simply stayed home. The generals announced the suspension of the constitution and the formation of a government of national salvation. They did not depose the king. They restored his dignity, making him the symbolic, sacred heart of a new authoritarian state. This is the state you now serve, and it is your job, as one of its chief ideologues, to explain its soul. You look down at the words you have written, and you feel a surge of intellectual pride. This is not another crude European fascism, a thuggish imitation of Rome or Berlin. This is something new, something uniquely Luso-Brazilian. The unexpected twist is the very nature of its ideology. It does not preach racial purity. That would be absurd in a kingdom built on 3 continents and a dozen ethnicities. Instead, it preaches a radical, anti-liberal form of pluralism. It co-opts a century of state propaganda. It takes the romantic Indianism of the 19th century, the syncretic theology of the Patriarchate, and forges them into a political doctrine. Your speech outlines the three sacred pillars of the nation: the Luso-European, representing reason, order, and the gift of Christian civilization; the African, representing body, labor, and the gift of tireless strength; and the indigenous, representing spirit, earth, and the gift of deep, ancestral connection to the American soil. The Estado Plural teaches that all three are essential. All are valued, but they are not, and must never be, equal. Each has its proper, God-given function. Harmony is not achieved through the chaos of individual rights and social mobility, but through the disciplined collective acceptance of one's place within this organic whole. It is a pyramid, beautiful and immutable. It is a corporatist state. The bickering political parties have been replaced by state-controlled syndicates for industrialists, for laborers, for farmers, for fishermen. All disputes are mediated by the state for the good of the nation. Strikes are treason. Lockouts are economic sabotage. The individual is nothing. The collective, functioning in its proper hierarchy, is everything. The ethical tension of your life is that you believe this with every fiber of your being. You see it as a humane alternative to the racial madness of the Nazis and the class warfare of the communists. It is a philosophy born of your unique history, a way to unify a sprawling, diverse empire without resorting to genocide or revolution. You are preserving culture, you tell yourself. By assigning it a function, you are creating stability. A sharp knock on your door breaks your concentration. It is your younger brother, a captain in the elite Fusileros Imperiais. He is on leave from his posting in Angola. He is taller than you, harder. The uniform of the plural state, a crisp khaki with green and yellow piping, fits him perfectly. His polished black boots click on your ancient wooden floor. He reads the page you have been writing, a smirk playing on his lips. The African pillar, through its noble sacrifice of labor, provides the motive force for our shared national destiny. He looks at you, his eyes devoid of any of the philosophical fire that burns in yours. You write very pretty words, Afonso. They are true words, Miguel. They are the foundation of our new order. Miguel sits down, stretching his long legs. I'll tell you about the foundation. Last month, the contratados at the Casinga iron mine went on strike. They wanted meat twice a week and an end to the 10-year contract. Said they were citizens of the plural state, not property. They had a copy of one of your pamphlets. Can you believe it? Quoting your nonsense about the dignity of the African body. He pauses, lighting a cigarette. The mine is a royal monopoly. Its output is critical, so we were sent in to restore plural harmony. We shot the ringleaders in the main square. We picked 50 more at random and sent them to the salt mines in Mozambique. The rest went back to work. They get meat once a month now, if the quotas are met. That's the motive force for our shared national destiny. You stare at him, a cold dread seeping into your chest. That is a brutal necessity. The actions of a few misguided men cannot be allowed to threaten the stability of the whole. Miguel laughs, a short, ugly sound. Misguided? They believed you. That was their mistake. You sit here in Coimbra, in this museum, and you build this beautiful theory of pillars and harmony. We are out in the world, on the ground, and we know what this island. It is a machine. The theory is just the paint you put on it to make it look nice. The machine's function is to keep the Luso-Europeans on top, the industrialists rich, and the rest of them in their place. We've always done it. Now we just have a better, more inspiring vocabulary for it. He stands clapping you on the shoulder. Don't look so grim, brother. Your work is important. The lies have to be beautiful, or people might not believe them. Keep writing. You're good at it. He leaves. The silence he leaves behind is no longer peaceful, it is accusatory. You look at your speech, at the elegant phrases about dignity and organic harmony. You see them now for what they are: a sophisticated justification for a system of brutality as old as the kingdom itself. The Estado Plural has not solved the contradictions of the Luso-Brazilian world. It has codified them. It has turned hypocrisy into a political sacrament. You look out the window at the setting sun. The youth of the kingdom will listen to your speech next week. They will stand at attention, their faces shining with patriotic fervour. They will believe your beautiful lies. And you will continue to write them because you are now a pillar of the state yourself. You are the mind, and you are trapped in the beautiful, harmonious, and monstrous prison you helped design. You are crawling on your belly through red dust that clings to your sweat-soaked uniform, and the world is a kaleidoscope of heat and fear. The sun is a malevolent eye in a bleached white sky. The dry grass rasps against your skin. Ahead of you, a small village of mud huts shimmers in the heat. It looks peaceful, deserted, but you know it is not. You have been fighting this war for 2 years. You know the enemy is always there, in the shadows, under the thatch, behind the smiles. The year is 1968. You are Alistair, a second lieutenant in the Fusileros Imperiais. Your grandfather was a British doctor who worked for Pedro II in the Amazon. Your family has, over 2 generations, become Luso-Brazilian, part of the fabric of the United Kingdom. You grew up in the manicured suburbs of Rio, believing in the creed of the Estado Plural. You were taught that you were part of a great pluricontinental nation, a harmonious family of 3 continents. This war, you were told, was not a colonial war. It was a police action, a fight against a few foreign-backed terrorists, communist agitators who sought to tear the family apart. You are in Mozambique, on the Makonde Plateau, near the Tanzanian border. The terrorists call themselves the Frelimo, the Front for the Liberation of Mozambique. They are not a handful of agitators. They are an army. They are armed with Kalashnikovs from the Soviet Union and landmines from China. They move like ghosts through the bush. A bush that is their home. They are fighting for something simple, something you are beginning to understand with a terrifying clarity. They do not want to be a pillar of your state. They want to be their own house. The United Kingdom has refused to decolonize. To do so would be to admit that the entire ideology of the Estado Plural is a lie. If Mozambique and Angola are not integral parts of the nation, then the kingdom is just an old-fashioned, racist European empire. It is an admission the regime in Lisbon and Rio cannot make, and so it fights. These are the forever wars. They are not one war, but a dozen simmering insurgencies across the vast African territories. They are a meat grinder, consuming a generation of the kingdom's young men and a bottomless river of its treasure. And the river of treasure flows, as it always has, from Brazil. The coffee, the sugar, the iron ore, and the diamonds, the wealth of one continent is being burned in the bush of another to preserve an imperial fiction. The captain's voice crackles over your radio. Team Alpha, advance to the first hut. Cautiously, you give the hand signal to your squad. They are a perfect microcosm of the empire. 2 are poor whites from the Portuguese Alentejo. 1 is a mixed-race kid from a favela in Rio. The heavy machine gunner is a black man from Bahia, a descendant of the Garimperos his grandfather's stories cursed. Your radio man is the son of an Azorean settler in Paraná. They are all subjects of the King Emperor. They are all here, fighting to keep this land part of their kingdom. The ethical tension of your existence is that you are good at this. You are a good soldier. You know how to read the signs, a broken twig, a flock of birds taking flight that signal an ambush. You know how to direct an artillery strike. You know how to kill. But with every village you search, with every prisoner you interrogate, the official narrative frays a little more. These are not foreign agitators. They are the people. They are farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and they hate you with a purity that scorches the air. You reach the first hut. The door is ajar. You kick it open, rifle raised, empty. A cooking pot, still warm, hangs over a dead fire. A child's wooden toy lies in the dust. This is the new strategy, the one dictated from the grand halls of the Ministry of Overseas Territories, Aldamentos. You are to round up the civilian population from their scattered villages and resettle them in fortified camps, surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers. This is to protect them from the insurgents, to win their hearts and minds. It is also to deny the enemy food, shelter, and recruits. It is a strategy of turning the entire countryside into a free fire zone. Suddenly, the world explodes. A deafening crack from the tree line, 100 meters away. The Bahian machine gunner grunts, a red flower blooming on his chest, and he collapses over his weapon. It's an RPG, an ambush. The air fills with the distinctive ripping sound of AK-47 seconds. Bullets thud into the mud walls of the hut, kicking up clouds of dust. You scream into the radio, calling out coordinates, calling for air support, for mortars, for God. This is the unexpected twist. You are not fighting just the Frelimo. You are fighting the modern world. In another timeline, a poorer, weaker Portugal would fight these wars alone and lose them. But your United Kingdom is rich. It has the industrial base. It has the money. And it has a powerful, if cynical, friend. The United States of America. In the global chessboard of the Cold War, the United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil is a crucial piece. It is fiercely anti-communist. It controls the strategic South Atlantic sea lanes and the vital air bases in the Azores. Washington, while publicly tut-tutting about colonialism, quietly provides the Estado Plural with everything it needs. The helicopter gunships that now appear over the horizon, their rotors beating a savage rhythm against the sky, are American-made Hueys. The napalm canisters they drop on the tree line are filled with American chemicals. The intelligence that pinpointed this village came from a CIA satellite. You watch as the helicopters make their first pass. The jungle erupts in blossoms of fire and black smoke. The enemy fire slackens, then stops. You have won. Or rather, a combination of Brazilian money and American technology has won. You crawl over to the dead machine gunner. You close his eyes. He died, fighting to deny these people the very thing his own ancestors dreamed of. Freedom. He died to protect a pluricontinental nation whose harmony is maintained by napalm and barbed wire. Later that evening, you are supervising the loading of the villagers onto the trucks that will take them to the Aldeamento. They are mostly women, children, and old men. Their faces are masks of grief and hatred. An old woman spits on your boots. You do not react. You are just a cog in the machine. A machine that is functioning perfectly. The rebellion is contained. The territory is secured. The strategic minerals continue to flow. The empire holds. But you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that this is not victory. You are not putting out a fire. You are sitting on a volcano. The forever wars are not a temporary crisis. They are the new, permanent condition of the United Kingdom. It is an empire that can no longer be held together by loyalty or ideology, but only by a constant, draining and brutal application of force. A force bankrolled by one continent, supplied by a superpower, and unleashed upon a third. And it cannot last forever. You are standing on a tank in the middle of the Terreiro do Pacho in Lisbon, and the air smells of carnations and revolution. It is the 25th of April, 1974. The salt spray of the Tagus estuary mingles with the diesel fumes of your armoured column. Yesterday, this square was a monument to the silent, oppressive order of the Estado Plural. Today, it is a carnival of liberation. People are everywhere, laughing, crying, singing. A girl with flowers in her hair has just stuck a red carnation into the muzzle of your rifle. It is a gesture of such profound, joyful absurdity that it feels like the dawn of a new world. You are Captain João, and you are 28 years old. Your entire life has been the Estado Plural. Your body has been a tool of its forever wars. You spent 3 years in the bush in Angola, fighting an enemy you came to respect more than the generals who sent you there. You returned not as a hero, but as a conspirator. You and your fellow captains, the men who actually fought the wars, came back with a secret, burning conviction. The empire was a cancer. The African wars were eating the kingdom's soul, and the wealth of Brazil was the endless supply of food that kept the tumor growing. The only way to save Portugal was to cut Brazil loose. Your movement, the MFA, Movimento das Forças Armadas, planned this perfectly. The coup was swift, almost bloodless. The old regime, brittle and hollowed out by the endless wars, simply crumbled. The Prime Minister has surrendered. The agents of the secret police are being hunted in the streets. You have done it. You have freed Portugal. You have ended the wars. You have severed the cord. The ethical tension of this moment is the purest joy you have ever felt. You have overthrown a dictatorship to bring democracy. You have ended a colonial war to bring peace. You believe, with the righteous certainty of the young, that you have done something unequivocally good. That evening, you are in the occupied headquarters of the state television network. The mood is electric. Your comrades are drafting communiques, debating the formation of a provisional government. On a television monitor in the corner, a news anchor, his face, a mixture of terror and exhilaration, is reading reports from the other side of the Atlantic. And this is where your new world begins to crack. The news from Rio de Janeiro is not of celebration. The generals of the Imperial Brazilian High Command, seeing their Portuguese counterparts embrace what they call a communist revolution, have declared the Lisbon coup an act of treason against the United Kingdom. They have announced the formation of their own junta of national continuity, pledging loyalty to the old king, emperor, who is now their heavily guarded puppet. They have closed the airports and seized all Portuguese assets. This you expected. A standoff, a cold divorce. But then the reports begin to flood in from elsewhere. This is the unexpected twist, the consequence you never imagined. The United Kingdom was not a marriage of two partners. It was a vast, complex machine held together by the centralizing force of the Estado Plural. You have not just switched off the machine, you have shattered its flywheel, and now the entire contraption is flying apart. From Sao Paulo, the news is of a second coup. The FISP, the powerful federation of industries of the state of Sao Paulo, backed by its own loyal army divisions, has rejected both the Reds in Lisbon and the Old Guard in Rio. They have declared an independent Republic of Sao Paulo. Their televised proclamation is delivered not by a general, but by a grey-suited industrialist. He speaks of efficiency, of free markets, of ending the ruinous subsidies to the agrarian northeast, and the parasitic bureaucracy of Rio. He announces the seizure of the Mandioca alcohol distilleries and the nationalization of the port of Santos. The industrial heart of the kingdom has just cut itself out of the body. Then, from the south, from Porto Alegre, the generals of the Third Army, the proud descendants of the Gauchos and Azorean settlers who conquered the Pampas, declare the formation of the Federal Republic of the Rio Grande. They announce their secession from what they call the corrupt, decadent North. They are soldiers and ranchers, and they will not be ruled by the factory owners of São Paulo or the courtiers of Rio. They immediately mobilize to secure their borders and the great Itaipu hydroelectric dam. You watch, stunned, as the map of your world is redrawn in a single evening. The United Kingdom of Portugal and Brazil, the great pluricontinental nation that has stood for a century and a half, is not splitting in two. It is atomizing. The long-suppressed regional identities of Brazil, papered over for generations by the ideology of the Estado Plural, are erupting with volcanic force. The Northeast, the old planter aristocracy, begins to murmur about its own path. The Amazonian states, long treated as a resource colony by both Rio and Lisbon, fall silent, their future uncertain. You, Captain João, wanted to free your country. Instead, you have just triggered a continental civil war. The clean, moral certainty of the morning shatters into a million pieces of grey ambiguity. The carnation in your rifle barrel begins to wilt. A month later, you stand on the docks at Belém, watching the last transport ship prepare to leave for Lisbon. It is filled with the families of Portuguese officials, soldiers, and civil servants who are being repatriated. They are refugees. The Lisbon you return to is not a utopia. It is a chaotic, impoverished nation, struggling to absorb hundreds of thousands of these refugees from its former empire, its economy in tatters, its future in Europe uncertain. You look across the Atlantic. It is no longer a bridge. It is a chasm. Over that chasm, the successor states are already at war. The Paulistas and the Gauchos are fighting a brutal border war over the Itaipu Dam. The junta in Rio is trying to crush secessionist movements in Minas Gerais, desperate to hold on to the state's mineral wealth. The Carbonado mines of Bahia, the kingdom's greatest strategic asset, are now controlled by a local warlord, backed by the northeastern landowners. The dream of a unified, Luso-Brazilian world has died. The sunset of the empire is not a gentle fading. It is a bloody, chaotic, and multicoloured spectacle. A sunset in three colours: the green of the land they are fighting over, the yellow of the wealth that corrupted them, and the red of the blood they are now spilling in the name of a new, fractured freedom. Your revolution was the first tremor of the earthquake, and the aftershocks will rattle the world for decades to come. The two paths diverged in 1821 with a choice. In our history, the choice was for separation. A prince's cry on a riverbank created an independent Brazil and a diminished Portugal. The split was, for the most part, peaceable, a family agreeing to live in separate houses. It led to a powerful, unified, though often troubled, Brazilian nation-state and a Portugal that slowly found its new, smaller place in Europe. They became cousins, then strangers, sharing a language, but little else. The other path, the one we have walked, was the choice for unity. The Lisbon Accord was not a cry of freedom, but a vow of partnership. It preserved the great transatlantic kingdom, forging a global power that shaped the 19th and 20th centuries. This united kingdom was strong, rich, and innovative. It industrialized, conquered, and projected its influence across the globe. It was a magnificent achievement of statecraft. But the trade-off was absolute. The price of that unity was the entrenchment of slavery, the creation of new forms of bondage, and the erection of a sophisticated authoritarian state that turned its own beautiful, pluralist ideology into a justification for oppression. The unified kingdom never resolved its core contradiction. It merely managed it, with ever-increasing levels of force. When the end came, it was not a peaceful divorce. It was a catastrophic structural failure. The very forces that held the machine together, centralized power, economic integration, a shared military, caused it to fly apart with unimaginable violence. The attempt to preserve a single Luso-Brazilian identity at all costs resulted in its utter annihilation, leaving behind not two nations, but a dozen warring fragments, a legacy of shared trauma, and a language weaponized by competing nationalisms. Our timeline's separation was seen as a failure of the imperial dream, but perhaps it was a quiet triumph of pragmatism, allowing two distinct cultures to find their own, separate destinies. The grand experiment of the United Kingdom proved that some bonds, when held too tightly for too long, do not strengthen. They turn to chains, and when they finally break, they shatter everything.